Everybody, welcome back to another episode of Colton Posey Fishing. So today we're going to be talking about something that I've covered in the past, but something that I feel like I need to cover again, simply because I still get a lot of questions about blueback herring lakes. And I completely understand blueback herring lakes can be very, very frustrating. And I'm going to go over some bait choices that you can do. I'm also going to go over like how these fish transition between different seasons and stuff, and where these fish are typically located during these specific seasons. Okay, so make sure that if you're new to the channel and you're interested in bass fishing, whether it's learning or you just like bass fishing in general, to hit subscribe. It helps me out a whole lot. Also, like the video if it helps you anyhow. Also, we've got members only now, so $2 a month, you get my content early access. Basically, it helps me with gas and all this stuff, camera equipment and all that stuff. So if you can do that, great. If you can't, I still really appreciate you stopping by, but either way, that's another option you can do to support the channel. So either way, guys, if you have any questions, drop a comment down below. We're fixing to jump into it, so stay tuned. This is something you don't want to miss. All right, guys, so welcome back. So let's just kind of jump into this. So blueback herring lakes, they can be a very difficult type of fishery. I mean, they're completely different than any other lake that you'll fish. And that was my experience as I learned to fish blueback herring lakes as I got older and got my own boat and stuff and started going up to a lake that's close to my home, like Smith Lake. It was I don't know. It was it was just completely different. I mean, we got super deep water everywhere. There's there's just, it was just different. I mean, than any other lake that we really had around us. And I could tell very quickly. When I say very quickly, I mean within a week of fishing it consistently, that the bass just act completely different. And I wasn't sure what to do. And to fast forward about 7 years after that little process there, I really got to a point where I felt confident enough to fish Smith Lake at any point in time and catch fish. And fishing other herring lakes, I noticed that things were very, very similar. They were all similar because of the herring. Let's just kind of jump into what are blueback herring and what do they look like, because you need to understand that to really be able to target these fish consistently. Okay, so blueback herring is actually a saltwater type of fish. It's I guess you can call it a bait fish, but it's actually a saltwater bait fish, and they can live in brackish water. They do have the name blueback herring, so a lot of people prefer to use a lot of lures with blue and stuff in it, but understand that blueback herring are not necessarily blue on their back. So blueback herring actually have that kind of a green color on their back, and then as they go further down, it's kind of a purplish, and then kind of expands from there to like a white color. In the light, they kind of turn a little blue on their bellies and stuff like that. So with that being said, understanding the color of these bait fish and understanding that they're saltwater fish, you need to understand that they have a saltwater attitude. Okay, so what I mean by saltwater attitude is they like large open areas to roam. Okay, so typically you're going to find your blueback herring in your most open areas closest to the dam. So, and when I say closest to the dam, I don't mean like right up against the dam. I mean, obviously there's going to be some up against the dam, but within that 20 to 30 mile radius, probably, give or take, on most blueback herring lakes, you're going to have those specific areas. You're going to have the biggest population of blueback herring. Now, once again, that does not mean the further you go away from the dam that you're not going to find blueback herring. There just may not be that big of a population. Now, with that being said, let's kind of cover the areas that these blueback herring tend to roam inside, the big area, the like 30 mile radius, we're just going to say. So your long clay points, that drop off into, you know, super deep water. Um, your bluff walls. Bluff walls is a great place to find herring. I mean, you will typically find herring anywhere close to a deep bluff wall because it's such deep water, and all they have to do is adjust the level that they're swimming in. So it's very easy for them to hide from prey and stuff like that, but it's also easy for the prey to catch the herring, if that makes sense. So either way, your long clay points, your bluff walls, deep docks, um, any kind of areas like that. Your main lake points, your secondary points, that's very, very close to the main lake. Um, Pockets is a great place to find blueback herring. So, and what I mean by pockets is like those little areas that's just right off your main lake. That's just like a little round cove, and it's clay. You maybe have some rocks, some fallen timber, and stuff like that, but it's deep. Those are great places for herring to hold up. Run-in areas. So like those pockets or those little short creeks that have a good run-in, that there's a lot of blueback herring that will transfer to those areas once the run-ins start coming in. So targeting the blueback herring, now that you understand that kind of exactly what these blueback herring, the areas that these blueback herring tend to stay, and this is a year-round process, okay? So I want you to understand that the bluebacks are typically going to be the same area year-round. You never really, I don't know how to explain it. They don't just like move up in a creek and they're in the creek for, you know, a month. They move. They're constantly moving. So the bass kind of do that too. And a lot of times, some of the bass do not actually move. They'll hang out in an area and they will not feed until they see the herring. So sometimes tricking those fish into biting, saying that they're eating herring or that the herring's coming by, it can be very, very difficult if you're not matching the exact size of the herring, the exact color and stuff like that, because they're so honed in on what they're eating. It's really, really hard to trick those fish into, you know, eating whatever type of artificial lure you're using. So be aware of that. But either way, let's talk about the bass. So that's what we're going after, right? Let's talk about the bass and exactly what they do. So most of the time on your blueback herring lakes, you're going to have a big abundance of spotted bass, and you're going to have a decent population of largemouth bass. But there's been a few things change over the years that I've been noticing personally on my home lake, and that's, you know, most of the time you would find the largemouths in the creeks and you would find the spots on the main lake. Now that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be, you know, largemouth here and there on the main, and there wouldn't be spotted bass in the creeks. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I am saying is you would typically 99% of the time catch spots on the main lake, and then 99% of the time you would catch largemouth in the creeks. But I've noticed over the past couple of years that I'm actually starting to catch more largemouth on the main lake. And that does not mean that there's not a huge population of largemouth in the creeks or anything like that. There's still that bigger population of largemouth that's in the creeks. But with that being said, I think some of these largemouth are starting to transition out to the main lake more than they are to the creeks, which is pretty cool to see because now you're catching spots and largemouth together on the main. Now, with that being said, most of these fish are hanging out in the same areas, the long clay points, the pockets, the docks, and stuff like that. Typically, I notice most of my dock fish come later on in the day when the sun's the highest. They'll be pushed up under the buoys and stuff. So learning how to skip your bait can help you a whole lot. But these fish act completely different. Okay, so most of these fish will actually move out and suspend, and they sit there and they look straight up. And then when they see these herring come over the top of them, then they move up and then they attack the herring. That's when you get that real crazy feeding frenzy that you see on these blueback herring lakes. And you know, there's several little tricks you can do to catch them, and we're going to get to that here in just a minute. But I just kind of want you to understand that these bass and stuff, they're very, very temperamental because they're eating a specific type of bait fish, and they're used to whatever size they are, and they're used to whatever color that they're used to seeing them in the water. And you've really got to match it. So one of the best things you can do is when you catch one that's feeding on herring, try and see if he has one in his throat or anything. And that way you can get that herring out and you can actually, find a bait about the same size. Okay, because size is going to be very, very detrimental. And then when you have the super clear water, that's when color is very detrimental, to catching more fish. So, with that being said, don't let any of this scare you, because the good news is on every single lake, you have fish that live on the main lake, they die on the main lake, they spawn on the main lake, and then they transition off the main lake. Same way with the creeks. You have fish that live in the creeks, they die in the creeks, they spawn in the creeks, and they transition out to the main lake at certain times. So there's always populations of bass between, I'm just going to use this as just here and there, okay? So between the main and then the creeks. So understanding that, you have a high percentage of catching fish. It's just detrimental to understanding, what are these fish feeding on? If the main lake's not working and I have to transition to the creek, I need to understand, are they feeding off crawfish, or are they feeding off threadfin shad? We have that a lot at Smith Lake. So if we have issues catching fish, or if I have issues catching fish on the main lake, then I move to the creeks and then I target the fish that's typically eating the little threadfin shad. So then I have to adjust all my lures to something smaller, to mimic those threadfin shad, and then also to a crawfish pattern, because there's always fish that's eating crawfish no matter what lake you're on. So you can catch fish between here and there, no problem. It's just understanding where the movement is. So make sure you're paying attention to each fish you catch, because a blueback herring lake is super easy to pattern. It really is, and we tend to overthink it as anglers. When you're catching fish off the main lake points, that's like, you'll notice that there doesn't seem to be this massive population of spots in this one area. There may be 5 to 15, or 15 to 20, or 20 to 25, and that does sound like a whole lot, but compared to a lot of other lakes, you can get on a huge abundance of bass, a mega school. And you typically don't see that on blueback herring lakes, in my experience. You typically don't. Anywhere, it's average 5 to 15 in a specific area. So what I typically like to do is I will move to like a point and catch 1 or 2 fish, and then if they slow down, then I'm right back at the helm and I'm straight to another point that's similar to the one that I just caught fish, and then I'm doing the same thing over and over again. Doing that and moving quickly, you can cover a lot of water, you catch a lot more fish. If you're sitting in an area and just trying to fish it to death, a lot of times, it takes a long time to get those fish fired back up. Now, with that being said, let's kind of move on to the baits, okay? So obviously, no, I did not get one out, but a topwater walking bait is probably my go-to at any blueback herring lake, because most of the time these herring are swimming close to the top of the water, and like I was talking about earlier, these bass will sit under the blueback herring and look straight up, and then when the herring come over the top of them, the bass come up, and they, yeah, that's where you get them crazy topwater blow-ups on blueback herring lake. So your walking baits, I typically use a Strike King Sexy Dog Jr. Simply because it's a smaller profile, but the fish can be very hard to trick. So Strike King Sexy Dog Jr., this is probably my go-to up at any type of herring lakes. Now, this right here is the nude version. Okay, and as you notice, it's clear, and then I've got that little feather treble hook. That gives a type of contrast in the water and something for those fish to target, so you'll have a lot more consistent fish catches, not as many swiping and then missing the bait. Now, moving on, another great little jerk bait that you can use to help target these fish is simply the Mega Bass. This is the X80 Trick Darter. This is a great option, but you've got to understand, being on these blueback herring lakes, you can't typically move your bait as slow as you typically do on another lake. If you watched my fall fishing video and you saw how fast I was working a jerkbait and how fast I work flukes and stuff, that is typically how I run my baits on blueback herring lakes. You have to make it super fast, okay? So it's not about making this bait perform the absolute best that it can, but giving it an erratic action that triggers a strike. And if you do that, you will catch a lot more fish on blueback herring lakes. It's just getting used to doing that and being confident in it. Now, another bait that you can use to stay close to the top of the water and also move it very quickly, and it's one of my favorite bites to get, period, besides top water, is a spinner bait. And this spinner bait in particular is what's called a spot sticker. And the spot sticker, the way that this bait is designed, by the way, I'm not sponsored by any of these companies. This is what I use, okay? So, either way, the spot sticker, you can actually burn this spinner bait a lot faster than you can most other spinner baits, and it doesn't have that rollover where it's trying to swim on its back, okay? So this bait is very, very versatile, and you catch a lot more fish off of it, okay? I typically go with, the chartreuse and white, and then I also go with the lavender shad. Now, another bait that you can use that you hear me talk about a whole lot is swim baits, okay? So swim baits is very, very key, okay? So this is the 3.75 inch. I use the Rage Swimmers. Now, it looks like there's a lot of swim baits in here, and there is, okay? But guys, keep it simple, okay? I've got probably 30 packs of Rage Swimmers in here, but they're all about the same color. I've got mainly just electric shad, and then I've got the pearl white or pearl flash or something like that, and then ghost shad. That's it. That's it. I mean, that's all that's in this bag. That's all that I use. I mean, you don't really need a whole bunch of colors, okay? And bait companies may hate when people say that, but it's the truth. You don't need a whole bunch of colors, okay? So your whites, your ghost shads, anything that looks very, very natural to the bait fish that they're eating, it'll be a great color. I mean, if you didn't buy electric shad and you went with like a Pro Blue Red or something like that, that'd be fine. It'll be okay. It's not a big deal. But your 3.75 swim baits is a great option to catch these fish. Now, cooler water, which means 60 degrees and under, I go with a 1/4 ounce head. That way I can really, really slow that bait down. Anytime the water temp goes over 60, well, I'll say 60. Once it really starts heating up and the spring action is really kicking off to where you can move your baits faster. If you watch my power fishing video, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Once you can move those baits faster, I swapped to a 3/8 ounce head, and that allows me to keep that bait higher in the water column and then reel the bait faster also, okay? So by being able to reel that bait faster, it triggers that reaction bite, okay? This is Strike King Rage Swimmers also, but this is 2.75 inch, okay? There's a couple of I have some Young Pulse shads and stuff in there to put on jigs and stuff like that. I don't know what else is in there, but mainly what I use out of this bag is the 2.75 inch Rage Swimmers for blueback herring lakes, and I use the 3/8 ounce 4x4 little jig heads, and I also use the Smalley Smashers. Kind of hard to get a hold of, but if you got a tackle shop in your area that carries that stuff, then that would be a better option to find in the heads, because on Tackle Warehouse and stuff, they're typically sold out. If you buy off eBay and stuff, they're a little bit more expensive. So if you can find them in your local tackle shop, that would be amazing to help you out a whole lot. But same with them. I use a 3/8 ounce head 99% of the time. That way I can move that bait a little bit faster, keep it higher in the water column while I'm moving it faster. And that's just a good option to when the lakes become very, very pressured. And you can just put it on a little swim bait head and burn it, and you'll catch a lot more fish. And now I do want to say, if y'all watch my videos during the spring when I make videos, there's a lot of sniffling. There's gonna be a lot of weird cuts and stuff because I sneeze a lot. I have horrible allergies, so I apologize for the breathing heavy, for that. So I have horrible allergies, so I know it's weird. Outdoorsmen having horrible allergies, but hey, it is what it is. Now that you know some baits, another one that I do want to bring up that I forgot, but it's a super simple bait, is the fluke. And you're going to work that fluke the exact same way. And I will say this, you cannot work the fluke fast enough, okay? I have people get in my boat all the time, they look at how I'm throwing a fluke, and they're like, you're insane, they're not going to bite that. And then they come up, busted up on top water, and then they're like, okay, maybe you're not crazy. But you're looking for those reaction bites. So be aware, you need to move your baits faster on blueback herring lakes, okay? You do not, if that water temperature is not cold, and I mean 65 and under, if it's not that cold, then you do not need to slow down. If it's 65 or above, move your bait quicker and you will catch more fish. I guarantee you will. But first, you've got to build up that confidence. You got to have that positive mindset that you are going to catch fish. It's all determined on you. So just be aware of that. Once you start catching fish on blueback herring lakes and you understand what's going on, you become more confident and you will catch a lot more fish on those lakes. So don't get discouraged by it. I know it's easy to do. I spent 7 years on my home lake practicing over and over again and not really feeling confident that I could go up there at any time and catch fish. But after a long 7-year period, which I was by myself, after a long 7-year period with no help, I finally started putting the pieces together on this lake. Sometimes it just takes longer than it does others. So, but you know, that's my experience with blueback herring lakes. Long clay points. A lot of your main stuff is typically where your blue herring's going to be. And then in your creeks and stuff, you're going to have your crawfish and your threadfin shad or whatever kind of other shad you may have, you know, in that particular lake. But you can catch them there and in between, but just make sure you're using baits that are matching the hatch. Make sure you're covering a lot of water. Don't sit on one area too long. If you go on a span and you catch 4 or 5 fish and then you go, you know, 15, 20 minutes and you're not catching anything, get up and move. Okay, and you'll start getting into a rhythm where you understand, hey, I caught 5 or 6 fish here, we need to go. And listen to yourself, you know. Listen to yourself. If you get that feeling like you need to go, then go. Don't just hang around and waste time. I'm one of the world's worst at it. Always have been, and it's took me a lot of years to really understand when I need to move and when I don't need to move. But, you know, that's determining on your confidence level in the area that you're fishing. So either way, guys, I hope the video helps. If it did, make sure to like, subscribe for more content. I got you covered when it comes to anything bass fishing. You can follow Colton Posey Fishing on Facebook, Instagram, X, YouTube, TikTok, all that good stuff. So make sure to check me out over there for more fishing content, and I'll see you next time.